because we're passionate about the Tea Party movement. We want to see it be an important force as it was in 2010. Going forward in 2012 is here for an update. First of all, on last night's Tea Party caucus gathering in Wahpeton, and then we'll tackle a couple of Tea Party topics in the news. Gary, how'd Wahpeton go?
We had a great meeting, Scott, Rob. It was we had a nice turnout, and this group in Wahpeton, I think you know them, Scott. You probably were down to one of their tea parties, but there's a group of about a dozen, 15, 20 or so that meet twice a month, and they sit down, and part of their agenda is to study the Constitution. They say, so often we spend so much of our time, watching television, doing all these other things, and we kind of forget what this country was founded on. And so they actually got one of the things that I thought was very impressive is they spend time, studying and doing a little training on the Constitution and what it means. And so had a great group. We had a good turnout, and we're excited to be working with those folks down there.
Next week it's Dickinson, if memory serves me correctly. I know we have the whole list up at ndtpc.com. North Dakota Tea Party Caucus is the acronym there, but also at scotthannon.com. Is it Dickinson next week, Gary?
Yeah, we're off to Williston next week, actually, on the 21st at the International Inn.
Oh, okay. Williston.
They got a great group up in Williston, and we're excited to go up and meet with those folks and see if they want to be a part of what we're attempting to do. And Dickinson the following week. And so, a part of what we're doing is just meet with these groups saying, hey, here's what we're wanting to do. We want to get together as a group of people that, like what the Tea Party's about. What we're trying to do is network a lot of these Tea Party caucus together, get involved in the political process, and, to just, talk about founding principles or what the Declaration of Independence is about, the Constitution, limited government, less government spending, what's going on in Washington. And so it's just kind of a good fellowship time, but at the same time, when you come together as a unified force, you can be involved in the elected process. Because one of the comments I said last night is, if you aren't involved, someone else is going to govern and elect. Who gets elected are the ones that govern. So that's what we're really talking about. Unless you elect someone, you're just in the sidelines.
So Williston, for our listeners in the oil patch on KTGO, International Inn, 6 to 8 p.m. This coming Thursday, and then Dickinson the following Thursday. I had my weeks mixed around there, so that's great. Any hot Tea Party topics from the crowd in Wahpeton last night that they're concerned about?
Some of the things that I thought was interesting is they're a little concerned because we come across very pro-Republican because most of us, one of the things I always like to ask people, are you conservative, are you libertarian, are you Republican, are you Democrat? Nationally, I think the Democrats claim about 15% of the people are Tea Partiers within their party, or people are called the Tea Party, and it's about 55% Republican. I have yet to have anyone at any one of these meetings actually raise their arm and say they're a Democrat. And so, what we're encouraging these guys to do last night, I think only one or two in the whole crowd had ever been to a Republican convention. And we're saying, we're a two-party system. You need to get involved in that process. And so, up until now, they've kind of taken a position about education is very important, and we really agree with that. Having time for people to discuss issues. So a lot of our discussion was around, how involved do you get in the Republican Party or the political process. And so there's good discussion about that. And we don't come into these districts or local areas and say, here's what you got to do. We're just in there saying, hey, can we help you? Something's going on. What can we do to be a resource for you? And I believe they're going to be a great group to work with us in the future.
There's this major showdown going on over the debt limit negotiations in Washington, D.C. Coincidentally, Minnesota just coming off 2 weeks of a shutdown. The Republican leaders there held their ground, would not give in to raising taxes. The governor blinked because, he just hated the idea of government being shut down, even though hardly anybody missed it, for crying out loud. But I think that's a great lesson for what's going on in Washington, D.C. And really, you have folks, even Republican leaders, saying, look, if we don't raise the debt limit, you could have a major damage to the economy. Do you have any sense that is, something that the Tea Party faithful here in the heartland are watching closely and trying to influence?
It very much was one of the subjects we talked about last night. And they're very concerned that Republicans will buckle under, and it'll be business as usual, we'll compromise, and we won't negotiate well, and we're going to raise the debt limit without doing major cuts. And I think if Republicans do that, from what I heard last night from those folks, they're going to say, I'm about done with the Republican Party. And I think we need to see the Republican leadership stand strong, stand up to Obama, not buckle into him. Because if that happens, there's going to be, the Tea Party movement will be as strong in 12 as it was in 10 or greater.
I want to also ask you your take on two other local topics, and one has to do with a potential challenge on the Republican side for the nomination of Rick Berg, who's announced that he'll be leaving his House position to run for a Senate position with a vacated seat given up by Kent Conrad. The fundraising numbers came out today. Rick Berg raised $460,000 in the last reporting period, has $550,000 cash on hand, and that's something where, as we sit here in the summer of 2011, a year and a half before the election, does that have the potential to scaring off a challenger, do you think?
That's a lot of money this early for someone who's just getting in the race. But Rick, obviously, being a sitting congressman, has access to raising money, as a sitting congressman. That's the advantage Pomeroy and Conrad and Dorgan always had over the years, where it's really difficult to put a challenger in place. I think in the context of a Democrat taking Rick on, if Rick becomes the ultimate nominee, he's going to have plenty of money to run a real strong campaign, just like he did against Pomeroy. When it comes inside the party to challenge Rick, I think there will probably be a challenge, but, Rick could easily, spend a couple $1 million, in this next election cycle up to $4 for a U.S. Senate bid. And, I think the idea of a challenge is good because in the process, Rick isn't entitled to be automatically the Senate candidate. And a little bit of frustration people have is when sometimes it comes down to that it's a sense of entitlement, whether it's Rick or anyone else that's a sitting incumbent. And that's part of the Tea Party movement, is the frustration of the sense of entitlement with the incumbency. And so with Rick raising money, of course, he wants less competition because that makes his life easier and it makes things easy for him to be prepared for the general, which is going to be difficult anyway, whoever the Democrats put up. But I think it makes Rick a better candidate. If a conservative steps up and challenges him and raises money, I think we're going to see someone in that race. I think we'll probably see someone challenging, Governor Dalrymple and along with what's going on in the House. There's going to be a lot of money spent in this election cycle, and I think it's good to get people involved in the process.
Last question for you. Some local pastors have signed on to a national letter warning Obama and Congress about balancing the budget on the backs of the poor. Is that an argument that will give the Tea Party tenants or the Republican leaders, case for balancing the budget and ultimately getting our fiscal house in order, some challenges politically, or do you think that's tired old rhetoric that by balancing the budget or getting the fiscal house in order somehow you're jamming it to poor folks?
I think the whole idea we're going to put it on the backs of the poor. Well, first of all, 50% of the people in this country don't pay taxes. And second of all, Obama driving up with what he's done with his policies with gas prices almost $4, and what he's trying to do to drive up utility bills for energy so people use less, talked about causing damages to the poor. That is going to be a much greater problem on those poor policies to impact home budgets, is what he's doing with energy policies and tying back the gas and home heating and food prices, which are going through the roof because of these things that are going on with energy prices. So, they kind of use that as a rhetoric to try to scare and get into this class warfare, and the Democrats have done that for years, and I suspect that'll be part of one of the plays out of the Democrat playbook. But you know what? It's not going to fail in North Dakota, and I suspect some parts of the country it might get some legs, but I don't think that dog's going to hunt this cycle up here.
Gary Emineth, part of the North Dakota Tea Party caucus. They are crisscrossing the state. Williston next week, International Inn on the 21st, 28th in Dickinson. Check out ndtpc.com or scotthannon.com on the Common Sense Club calendar to find out where they're going to be next. Gary, have a nice weekend.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Take care.
Folks, we're coming to you live and direct from the North Dakota Petroleum Council studios, and I want to spend a moment talking about North Dakota's oil and